You found out, Jonty, what it is? Whether it is first-time buyers or?
No, I've texted Lucy, my wife. I've got 2 blue ticks. She's read that, so she's probably having a look at it now.
Yeah, he's doubled the nil tax rate stamp from 125 to 250. So he will save money.
Tell me that again, sorry.
What he's done, he's doubled the nil rate stamp duty ban from 125 to 250.
Got you.
Okay.
So if you buy £1 million house, you have just set, you're only paying stamp duty, well, you're paying stamp duty on
first 250.
Yeah. Well, that could be quite meaningful. Not that I'm buying £1 million house, but it's quite.
We should save you about two and a half thousand quid, something like that. So it's a saving. Welcome to those who are joining us. This is our first session back since the holidays, so pleased to see people signing in. If you would like to let us know where you're from, you can always use the chat, and please feel free to do that. We're just going to give it a minute or two to let more people join, and then we'll get going. We're joined today by Jonty, who's Head of Cyber Risk Management at Gallagher, and I'll give you a little bit more information in a minute on how he's going to run the session. Just give us a few more seconds and we'll welcome people in. So, welcome to those who've kindly joined us today. I think what we'll do, Jonty, we'll get going. We record the session, so as numbers pick up, people will come in. So Jonty said to me beforehand that he'd very much like today's session to be interactive. So as Jonty talks and he poses questions or anything you'd like to answer, you can come in, raise your hand, and we'll actually bring you in so you can ask your question and always get a second chance as well on a response. So I'm going to hand over to Jonty, who is Head of Cyber Risk Management at Gallagher, to explain a little bit more about himself, his role, and Gallagher's. So Jonty, many thanks. It's over to you.
Okay, well, thank you for having me today. I feel quite privileged to be having today's conversation because in my presentation today, I'm going to be talking about some real world case studies of serious incidents that I've dealt with, where our clients have been in the middle of, what they would describe as the worst commercial day of their life. So just to recap on my role, being Head of Cyber Risk Management for Gallagher means that 2 things. One, I help our clients not get into a position where they are being hacked. So we have a team here that basically specialize in things like penetration testing, auditing, maturity assessments, phishing simulations, all of the things that you do basically to make your business less vulnerable to a cyber incident. The slightly more less savory part of the job is that I get the phone call if a construction, manufacturing, financial institute company has had an incident. And my job in that is to try and help them get back to a place where they are up and running and nobody has been affected. So our business here is global. We consult all over the world, and the main space that we operate is within the UK. So I'm just going to flip my screen to screen sharing. And again, part of today's major advantage is hopefully I can tell you something today that you could take back to your business and make a change so that you are not one of the companies that potentially may be phoning me or your insurance broker or a digital forensics firm to come and get you out of a problem. I do like my sessions to be interactive. So if there are any moments today where you have a question or you think, actually, I just want to touch on something that he just said, absolutely just raise your hand or put a question in the chat box, and we can deal with that. So part of this morning's presentation is to actually show you some really interesting things and actually talk about a real case study. And when I was thinking about, how best to really convey why the construction industry is such a target for an attacker, I thought, let me talk to you about a specific event that I went through really early on in my career that quite literally defined why I have stayed in it. So I was at a corporate budget meeting day, essentially, what's going on next year, all that type of stuff. And a client of mine gave me a call, and I missed that phone call, and it went through to voicemail. And when I picked up that voicemail, it said, John T, can you give me a call as soon as possible? We've been hacked and all of our staff are outside the office. And I phoned this gentleman back who was the finance director of the business, and I said, I'm up the road, basically. I can come and meet you. So anyway, communicated to my boss at the time, I need to leave, need to go and see this company. So I got in an Uber, and as I was coming down the road that his offices were on, there were a line of people outside the office waiting to get in. And this had been going on for some time, so they could have been staying there for a while. And I said to the finance director, what have you said to your staff? He said, well, I told him that we have a door issue. We can't figure out why we can't get access to our fobs and our door system. And I said to him, well, do you know why? And he said, well, no, but I have had an email from our IT company saying that the servers are down also. And I said, well, potentially this could be a hack that's affected your servers, which your door systems are on. And I said to him, you're going to have to tell your staff to go home until we can figure this out, and go home because we have an IT issue. Not necessarily we've been hacked, but we have an IT issue. So anyway, that was communicated to all of the staff. And I think a lot of people in the queue thought, well, this is not bad. We get a day off. We can go home. Anyway, what is interesting about this is at that specific time, the team at that company had no idea what was about to unfold. And these were a construction company. So this is corporate staff that we're sending home. So not necessarily the people that by definition are producing the product that makes the money, but obviously facilitating that happen. So we obviously couldn't get into that office. So the finance director had to come to our office, where we started to make some phone calls to the IT company. And, as conversations start to unfold, it was, yeah, I think we've been hacked, and I think we've got ransomware on our machines. And one of the most shocking moments I experienced, and I actually watched the color drain out of the finance director's face, was that the IT company said, and all of the backups are also on that server. So we have lost all of the backups as well. And the finance director said to the IT company, so what does that mean? And a big long pause as to, well, we have no way of getting that information or getting back to a place that we can restore the network to. So we are basically in a corner. So a few days of trying to figure out how we can get this network reinstated, digital forensics, looking at firewall logs, all of the things that point towards how has this happened. And we were able to confirm that a hacker had been inside that network. They had got in through remote desktop. It was at a point where they didn't have multi-factor authentication on the network, which I'll be talking about today. And the company had a thing called local administration password enabled, which is basically where every computer had the same password from an administrative perspective. So once the attacker had got the one password, it was the same for every device on that network. Conveniently, the attacker had disabled antivirus, all anti-ransomware, because he had been on that network for some weeks. The business had no idea that somebody had been on the network for obviously that amount of time. Had they have known, they obviously would have tried to disable external access. So 2 days later, we get to a place of, okay, yeah, no, we definitely can't find these backups. We are in a complete corner. And the finance director says, well, why don't we ask all of our suppliers what we owe them? We'll ask our customers what they owe us, and we'll ask our staff what we pay them. And we can potentially, start afresh. To which I said, that's fraught with errors and potentially could introduce some legal issues as well. So the better option here is to pay the ransom. And this was a particular insurance client of ours. So we talked to the criminal, said, how much do you want to be able to give this business back to my colleagues, my clients? And they said, we would want £250,000 for that. And I said, well, that's going to blow the budget. Could you move on that number? To which, we settled on a number half of that, £127,000 in Bitcoin, which back then, before the Bitcoin boom, was about 12 Bitcoin. So I asked the attacker to send back a unencrypted file to prove that they could re-establish this network. They had the decryption keys, and the attacker did. They sent me back a PDF back in its normal form, and essentially that was proof of life. We can get this network back to where you want it to be. The payment was made. We had to get approval from the National Crime Agency. They had to approve that I didn't know this attacker, that anybody knew this attacker. We had to go through a Bitcoin exchange to get the money transferred. And then the payment was made. And then within 5 minutes, the attacker had reissued the backup files, everything. And quite literally, I actually heard the doors come back online. And the moral of the story here, apart from the big piece that we're going to talk about around the controls that were not in place to enable that to happen, was this company was an insurance client where for £127,000 of cash, they actually only had to pay the excess on their insurance policy, which at the time was £10,000. So setting aside the potential reputational damage, business interruption, and all the rest of it, all of that was covered under a cyber insurance policy. And a big part of my world is helping clients balance what is transferable to an insurance policy and what is within their gift to manage through all of our services with cyber risk management. The reason why construction is so important to me and how I've seen it firsthand really be attractive is because, unlike other industries, if you cannot build houses, build whatever you build, there is a genuine financial stop. If you think about an insurance broker, if you were to try and hack them, the better play would be to steal information, professional, fees, all that type of stuff, and, leak that information. For construction, if you can disable the, shop floor side of it or the operating technology, construction grinds to a halt, and it's the exact same as manufacturing. So a construction client is always in the higher risk for espionage, any form of espionage from an operating technology shutdown. Other industries don't have the same threat profile as construction for that very reason. They can limp by if they don't have certain parts of the network working. But if your guys out on the shop floor or the operating side of the business cannot get access to their files, systems, what they need to be able to do their job, there is a straightforward business interruption financial impact. And again, for a criminal, it's a bullseye, and also a reason for that, why construction companies are more inclined, in my case study, to want or have to pay the ransom, because there is no option. The way that you work is completely linked to being online and out and being able to do what you do. So that case study, I actually moved through a few things as to how that incident happened. And in today's webinar, some of the takeaways that I want to give you are: go back to the office and have a look at these things. But just before I get there, it would be really interesting for me to know if anybody on this call has ever suffered a cyber incident or has been a part of a cyber incident similar to that. So if you're on mute or want to drop anything in the chat, please feel free, and I'll give you a couple of minutes just to do that. I mean, it's very promising if nobody has been involved in a cyber incident from a professional or a personal perspective. But again, when I say, have you been involved in a cyber incident, even things at home, people try to dupe a fake letter or send you a phishing email to your personal device. Again, has anybody ever experienced that in either walk of life? Okay, right, perhaps not. So, a part of the
Sorry,
construction.
excuse me, Jonty, sorry. Chat is disabled.
Oh, okay. I wonder if we can enable that. But yeah, if chat's not going to work, yeah, please feel free to just talk about it. Sam, have you got a specific incident that you've dealt with?
I was just going to say I've had phishing emails at home, and I've had some weird ones at work, mostly on WhatsApp, to be honest. That seems to be that seems to be the things that I get, sort of saying, "Oh, hi Sam, it's X, someone who I know. Could you please go to the bank and get me £500 out and then go and buy lottery tickets, please? This is for staff bonuses this month," and nonsense like that.
I was going to say, Sam, I'm sure you did that. You went to the bank.
Yeah, I rushed off immediately.
Yeah, but because that's you, noble, always there to give, even to strangers. So yeah, I mean that would form part of phishing or smishing. Where the human element is always the piece that is being targeted, and for good reason as well. 66% of our claims from a cyber perspective come from exploiting a human being. And I don't know whether it's a cultural thing, but we are so inclined to trust people. Not in this particular case, Sam, because that's so obviously, fraud. But some of the emails that you will all be getting, a lot of them are super believable. And the benefit of the doubt is, well, maybe this is legitimate. So WhatsApp, though, just whilst you're there, WhatsApp is an interesting one because lots of businesses use WhatsApp as a method of communication, and particularly on their own phones. I have a few claims where it's been difficult to fully understand the severity of an incident because there is personal information on mobile phones that aren't centrally managed by the business. So when they have said, okay, I need to recall information, they can't necessarily recall it off personal devices. Do you guys have an approach to mobile device working? That was to you, Sam.
Oh, I'm sorry. Whoever the host is asking us to reply to the message, but the chat is disabled, so we can't do that. Okay. I don't have a work mobile, so it's a personal mobile that I use for work. Yeah. So I would hope that they're not able to get anything off it now, basically.
Yeah, well, lots of organizations are using products like Intune or Mobile Iron to be able to wipe mobile devices, basically. But if you don't have a tool like that, you're kind of down to the individual, letting you know that they've lost their phone or something has happened. So you've seen lots more organizations having to buy essentially more technology to control the information that's going around.
True.
So one of the things that always comes up in my world of work is like, why are people not stopping this, or like who is in charge of bringing these criminals to justice? And one of the components that is used is the dark web. And part of my presentation today is to show you why criminals use that and how easy it is to use it. And, it offers a no-brainer to a cyber criminal. So in the 1980s, the US military built the dark web. And at a similar time at Leicester University, DNA was invented, where you could trace a person back to their biometric code. If you are to go and conduct a physical crime, DNA is all over the crime scene, and you can generally trace that back to a person if you have a suspect. That is a huge deterrent for criminals. I might be caught. The major difference with cybercrime is the odds or chance and infrastructure of being caught are completely in their favor. So with the dark web, you quite literally can change who and where you are. So you appear to be in Germany, but you're actually in Spain. and you appear to be working on this machine, but you're actually just hijacking another PC. Now, if you think about that for vulnerable criminals, people that are on the fence of, I don't really know whether I want to get into this, but this looks quite attractive, there's a huge draw to move into crime. But for organized crime gangs, it's an absolute luxury. You know, GCHQ have recently come out and said that it's one of the main reasons why cybercrime continues to happen, because it's largely uncontested. And if I show you just how straightforward this is, purely for an education purpose, my aspiration really is that we all start to think differently about the barrier between us here and how much is available for a criminal to use against organizations. So this is Tor. Tor is the agent you use to access the dark web. You download it for one of your devices, whether it's on Windows, OS, Linux, Android, and then all you need is an address to go to. And this is me downloading it here. And next step is to launch it and then find a web address that I can go and start to look at the interesting websites that are there. Just to prove my IP address thing, what is my IP address? My IP address is that, and it basically points me to being in Stretton-under-Foss, which is totally true. When I ask the dark web, what is my IP address? It basically starts to route my traffic around the world, so it obfuscates where I am. And if you see up here, the last place I will be caught from is the United States, because then I go through Germany, and then a different location in Germany, and then I go to this website. So now that I have an anonymous place to go, and I can't be caught, all I need is an interesting tool to use. There are a number of websites where you don't even need to educate yourself on how to do it, because you can quite simply pay somebody to do it for you. So, copy link address. This is me copying a website address called the Hidden Wiki. I'm to come up here and just punch that in. You'll see that the web address finishes in .onion, which is basically a location domain on the dark web. Unlike .com or .co.uk or .org or whatever, .onion is the prefix domain for the dark web. And, you know, there's loads of stuff around the dark web being like an onion because it's layers upon layers upon layers of obfuscation. So just while that's loading, I'm showing you things on both public and dark web. From a construction and manufacturing perspective, there are websites publicly available called, one of them is called Showdown. And it publicly broadcasts accessible entry points to particular industrial control systems. And again, just to reiterate the seriousness of this, if you have a Siemens industrial control system and it is online somewhere in the world, this website will collect the public entry points that if you had a username and password, you could get into that. Similar, there are websites like Have I Been Pwned that will tell anybody if an email address has been breached before. And again, I won't use any volunteers, but my personal email address many years ago has had 9 data breaches, meaning that the credentials to that email address are somewhere online. And most of the time, people use a username and password to log in. So again, when you start to look at public web versus dark web, you're completely anonymous. Criminals have an arsenal of tools to use against a business. And if I start to look in at some of these, this is a dark web website setting out specific websites for rent a hacker, buy a fake passport, buy credit cards, financial services, hidden wallets, hidden bitcoins, buy guns, all sorts of stuff. And the reason why I show you these is because if your business is to be hacked, where that gets turned into money is on these websites. And again, here is personal information being commercialized, credit card information being commercialized for the price of 120 US dollars. You can buy 10 cards with money on them. Hidden wallets, rent a hacker, where the price difference here is 250 euros. And in his words, the difference is me either destroying someone's life or just messing with them. So I imagine that will be the first time you've seen that kind of stuff. And again, we'll stop sharing and ask if there's any observations on that before I come on to how a business can really start to protect itself. This is where you tell me that you all use a dark web in your spare time, and it's old news. Okay, so how the construction industry can protect itself. Well, the first very easy question to ask yourself is, are you spending enough money on IT? Now, just to give you a dose of reality, IT is the business. When you think about how we work, we exchange data via emails, contracts, PDFs, information. It's all technology based. And one of the things that I see in great abundance is a lack of investment in the construction industry into IT. And many reports from the Big Four have suggested that 4% of annual turnover is an appropriate amount of money to spend on IT. If you're not spending that much, and again, this includes licenses, staff, infrastructure, everything. If you're not spending close to 4%, there is probably space to go on where you're investing. Now, the other thing, again, that I really want to bring your focus to is there is a massive shift in the construction industry from things being on-premise to cloud applications. So most of the construction industry uses things like Red Sky IT, Coins, Sage, and traditionally this used to be on-premise, and it's all now moving to cloud applications. From an operational perspective, it's really good. People on the shop floor can get access to their information wherever they are. But the major thing that we see lacking, and this brings me back to my case study, is boundary control. So how hard do you make it to get into these applications that you're now setting as publicly available? So things like multi-factor authentication, if you're using a VPN, not using what's called a public key, it's a domain-based key. But MFA, and again, just to talk about this some more, in the insurance world, if you don't have multi-factor authentication on your publicly accessible gateways coming into the business, you cannot get insurance, because it is seen as the biggest control and the biggest contributor to information security incidents. Going back to my statements around 4% of IT, if you are moving to an operational spend model, it will push up your spend. Because by definition, you're paying per month per user for IT. But with that, what you should be getting are information security patches, availability, and also a segregation in your liability. If you don't host it, well, you're less vulnerable to a fire. From a security perspective, physical security perspective, if it's not in your office, it's harder to steal. From a basic damage, you can't spill water over a server that isn't physically, in your building. But from a liability perspective, if a third-party application like Sage or Coins, Red Sky IT are to have an incident, technically, and from an insurance legality perspective, it's not your problem. You paid for a service to be given to you for X amount per month. So I see a huge benefit, not only in the operational element of being able to flex up user licenses with the security that you get from a third-party rented or hosted application. When we do our ethical hacks, we have no end of tools that can circumvent weaknesses on an IT network. And I just wanted to just talk about some of these just to sort of open your mind, really. When we talk about VPNs being secure, one of the things that we use is a tool called IkeScan. And that is basically to look at the encryption certificate that is used between 2 points that we could use if we had the username and password to hack into a VPN. Multi-factor authentication is the thing that you need across all of your VPNs or remote desktops. Things like John the Ripper is a password cracking tool. If you have weak passwords, this tool can essentially compare that password hash file with 1 million hash files to try and identify if that's the same password. Having a strong password policy and management tool where it's not possible for your employees to create weak passwords could be the difference in not being hacked. A tool like Dhashed, if your employees are using their work account for their personal life, and that personal application, take Tesco shopping, happens to get breached, they introduce a security problem for your business. Again, having a policy where you say, don't use your personal applications with your work email could be a great fix. But also, again, coming back to my point around multi-factor authentication, if you have that, it doesn't matter if an attacker has a username and password, because they can't get in unless they have that little text that gets sent to a phone. And I'm talking quite a lot about MFA because it's such a big thing in the insurance world, and I do believe it's a very good control. Does anybody have any questions on MFA or not understand what that is? Okay, great. And again, if you're too shy to comment, please put it in the chat. You know, don't mind at all having a conversation in the chat window. So let's resume. Most of you will be using Office 365, which is you know, the de facto standard for emails and, you know, sharing files and storing files. One of the big things that I'm working with my construction clients is to use Microsoft Secure Score. Microsoft Secure Score is a brilliant tool that comes free with Office 365. And what's interesting about it is it will give you specific areas where you can improve your infrastructure. And the ease of turning them on is quite staggering, because it's quite literally our job. You know, companies pay us to find these weaknesses, but Office 365's Microsoft Secure Score will tell you those weaknesses. Things here, look, I've just circled a few. Turn on the firewall on that Mac PC that's on this network. Again, Office 365 will just tell you, and it will tell you that it can improve your Microsoft Secure Score by 0.85%. And again, this is a quantifiable measure on how weak a particular control contributes to the greater picture. Things here, look, block execution of potentially obfuscated scripts. You don't need to understand that. You can click address and it will do it for you. Block Office applications from creating executable content. And what that means is that if a program tries to run on our network, please disable it. And what I will show you in real terms how that actually works. If an employee is to come in and open an email on your network and they click save and run, just like I'm doing in this video example here, ransomware works by encrypting the network, you know, in that case study that we spoke about this morning. By disabling the ability for a user to do that, quite literally by definition, you're stopping the ability for ransomware to run on that particular machine. And ransomware works by encrypting anything that it can see. And in my example earlier, if it can see the backup servers and everything else, it will encrypt all of that as well. Again, knowing how to turn that off is difficult, but having Office 365 and using Microsoft Secure Score, you can make that a lot more straightforward for you so that you don't get a page like this, which is ransomware, and it will start to demand that you pay a certain amount of money if you want to get your files back. Now, again, in today's conversation and the example that I used, MFA, password policies, VPNs have an MFA. One of the major things in my case study was that the backups were on the same network. You know, if there's one big takeaway today is make sure that you have a secure backup that is off-site. And when I say off-site, either physically or digitally off-site, it is in no way connected to your network. It is completely detached. And there are tools like Veeam or Datto that do this. But again, I still find a lot of construction organizations maintaining backups on site. And again, I think this is quite interesting just to show you ransomware, because if you've never seen how it actually works, you know, every ransomware has a different method of doing what it does, but by and large, they're all the same. They all do the encryption piece, and they get you to a place of, please, can you pay us some of money so that, you know, we can give you your files back. You don't have to pay the ransom if you have a backup that is working. So, moving forward. One of the proactive plans that we do with our clients is to run them through these things, which is phishing simulations. If a business is 66% likely to have an incident through a human being, phishing simulations surely are a good investment, because that is your biggest risk. And testing that your staff know how to spot a strange email is a good investment. External pen testing. Had that client been through an external pen test, they would have known that their remote desktop was publicly facing and vulnerable. Testing your network is a real world fire drill, and it models what an attacker can do. For those organizations that have lots of infrastructure on premise, testing the internal network against the CIS benchmark controls. There is a known standard of how internal networks should be set up. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Again, through us or another vendor, you can have your internal network checked. Azure config pen testing. So many organizations are using cloud services now, and it's a good thing, but there is a secure way to set up cloud. And again, why not ask an expert to tell you if there's any weaknesses and how you've got your setup. And finally, endpoints. As we work from home and everything is remote, there are more secure methods to shore up the endpoint machines, the laptops and the PCs. You can download images from CIS. You can make the endpoints your firewall. And again, we don't see organizations in the construction sector doing that. One of the things that I want you to think about is whether you know where your risks are on your network. And just this illustration here, where you see red, amber, green, this is incredibly basic, but you'd be surprised as to how many organizations still don't do this. If you were to look at your network today and operation and were to assess where is the biggest security problem, that would be part one. Rating it would be part two. Okay, if this server goes down, or this laptop goes down, or this application goes down, what is the impact to our business? Part three is doing the maths on if we leave it and it is to be hacked, what could that cost us? And what is the cost just to get it fixed? Again, our job as cybersecurity consultants is to tell an organization, here is where your weaknesses are, here's how you fix it. The actual proactive investment has to come from the business. And we find in an attack or like a claim that we're going through, it was the first time that a client had learned that that was a vulnerability for them, because they'd never actually asked them the question themselves. And again, a big part of what I'm trying to instill today is that you should be doing that. And you can do that through a framework like Cyber Essentials, IASME, or ISO 27001. These are documented standards that you can either go through with a consultant, or you can try and do it from a self-assessment perspective if you have the capability to do so. But knowing what risks are on your network is, basics in place. And the business deciding if it wants to do anything about that is, completely at your discretion. I just want to come off share and ask if anybody on this webinar actually uses something like Cyber Essentials or ISO 27001. Okay, yeah, somebody said yes to Cyber Essentials. So if you don't know about Cyber Essentials, it is a government-backed standard. There are 70 controls within it. You pay something in the region of 360 to, I think, £420 now to self-accredit yourself to Cyber Essentials. But the benefit of that is that you get to do what I've just done in that slide, where you say, are we open or do we not have this control? And by going through that, you can see for yourself where you're vulnerable. Another one here. Yes, both Cyber Essentials Plus required for government contracts. This is another interesting movement, specifically in the construction sector, that to be able to bid for contracts. Nobody wants to work with a supplier that is vulnerable, because everybody is now starting to appreciate the interconnectivity of organizations and data sharing. By working with a weaker party, you stand to introduce into your own company a problem. And again, I would urge everyone listening to think about their suppliers and how they vet them. And if I'm sharing gigabytes of personal information, how do you assure me that you're not going to cause my data subjects an issue? Anybody else have any strategies on how they specifically improve their own information security in their business? Okay. Well, I had anticipated some more questions and feedback. So, I always leave a little bit of time at the end of our content. One of the things that I want to leave you with is the ability to book yourself onto a free cyber defense check with me or a member of our team. It is completely free. We do basically a mini audit of your business from an external perspective. We have lots of tools that allow us to see whether you have vulnerabilities. And you can do that simply by emailing that email address. It'll either be done by myself or a number of people in my team. I would urge you to use that. It's completely free, and you could learn a hell of a lot in that half an hour session. And the outcome usually is, a few key takeaways and some thoughts around strategies for improvement. So with that, I'll hand back over to the host, say thank you for giving me the session today to talk to you guys, and hopefully we'll see you coming into the email for a free consultation.
Thanks, John T. I actually have a couple of questions, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
You said earlier on that the sort of view was that you need to invest around about 4% of your revenues.
Yeah.
Is that generally across all industries, or is that just generally a view for the construction sector?
All industries. And with that would be, the salaries of the IT team, everything that is associated with digital enablement. But yeah.
Okay. So do you know what the average percentage investment by the construction sector is? I mean,
no.
You've indicated it's not as high as 4%, but do you know what it is? Is it 2%?
No, it would be a great piece of work to do, actually, with all of our clients, just to send out a survey monkey, how much, if you were to accumulate salaries, wages, licenses, everything technology, what would that look like? And something we could do. But no, I don't have the specific number for our clients, no.
I think that would be actually quite interesting, because as you well know, the construction sector struggles hard on sort of margins of 5%. Mm-hmm. Whereas lots of industries have much wider margins, so hence they are able to invest more.
Yeah, no, good point. Yeah, if the margin is not there, how can you spend 4%? But I think that's also a case of repackaging what IT does for the business. So when you look at something like Microsoft PowerFlow, it can replace a lot of manual tasks. Think about things like buying a separate application to approve a hot work permit or a holiday request. Office 365 includes all of the ability to be able to do that if you configure it with the spend you're already spending on. So I think there is also, some work to be done on where can we actually make a saving with the technology we already have.
So is that, again, part of not understanding, failure to learn? Because the construction sector's not a great area for learning, I'm afraid. It's a bit resistant to it. Yeah,
well, it's that piece I said in the beginning around that most organizations are a data or IT first business now. And, fundamentally, it comes down to somebody at that business championing that as a strategic initiative. Like, how do we get more out of technology? That is my bag. And like you said, yeah, failure to learn, failure to upskill, failure to go and research, have a look. But I also run a business, so I can appreciate when we're all wearing many hats. People don't have time to go and sit on a 3-day course and do that. But equally, it could pay for itself being out of the business, immersing yourself in more technology stuff and bringing it back to the business.
One question leads to another, I suppose. How many of the construction sector do you think, how many sort of companies actually have someone who looks after cyber risk?
Yeah, I would say very few actually, because in my experience, it's normally the FD, finance director, and it's the bolt-on. It's not a specific role. You normally have an FD that looks after it, but there's an outsourced IT company. But again, our clients, range from sort of 10 million up to 600-700 million. And yeah, seldom do I see a specific information security role in that business.
Again, I didn't hear it. Maybe I missed it. Do you know what the average cyber loss is in the sector?
There was a recent paper that we put out that was around about £250,000. And again, why I hate that number is because it's an average. I think the better number would be to be the most common, but that was not the number. From a claim perspective, it is either a large business interruption issue or a data loss and privacy issue. So back in the day, like 5 years ago, it never used to be two at the same time. But what we're finding now, and I was dealing with a claim last week, ransomware was the secondary component to the claim, because 2 weeks prior to ransomware being deployed, they'd already had, data being pulled off the network and leaked onto dark web websites. So I think we're going to see claims increasing because attackers are now aware of the bigger money is in the releasing information because of things like GDPR, or if you're in the US, it's California Privacy Act. So yeah, my number of £250,000